The rain beat hard against the windows of the 32nd floor of the most coveted commercial building in Manhattan. Robert Ashford watched the city below, the lights blurred by the water running down the glass, creating hypnotic patterns he could no longer appreciate. He was 42 years old, with a financial empire valued in the billions of dollars, apartments on 3 continents, and a loneliness so profound he sometimes felt as if he were sinking into a bottomless pit. His routine was impeccable and empty. He would wake at 5 in the morning, work out for an hour with his personal trainer, review financial reports while sipping a green juice prepared by his nutritionist, and dive into endless meetings until 10 at night. On weekends, he would visit his property in the Hamptons, a 20,000-square-foot mansion surrounded by gardens he barely noticed. There, the silence was even more deafening. Robert hadn't started out empty. There was a time when he dreamed, laughed, loved. But each step up the ladder of success had demanded a sacrifice. First, it was time with friends, then the relationships that couldn't survive his obsession with work. Finally, something more subtle was lost, something he couldn't even name. It was as if, in conquering everything, he had lost the ability to feel anything. The women who approached him wanted his money or his status. The executives who surrounded him wanted his power. No one wanted to know Robert, the man behind the fortune. And perhaps that was because secretly he suspected there was nothing left inside to be known. On that rainy April Friday, Robert left the office at 11 at night. His driver was waiting, but he dismissed the service with a wave of his hand. He wanted to drive to the Hamptons alone, to feel in control of something, even if it was just a steering wheel. The road was slippery and fog was beginning to form over the dunes. He turned on the radio, but quickly turned it off again. He preferred the silence. He always preferred the silence, because the noise of the world reminded him how disconnected he was from it. He arrived at the mansion shortly after 1 in the morning. The property was illuminated, as always, thanks to automatic timers that created the illusion of life where there was none. Robert parked in the garage that held 12 vehicles, but where only 5 occupied space. He entered through a side door, taking off his rain-soaked jacket and tossing it onto a Louis XV chair that had cost a fortune at an auction in Paris. He didn't care about the piece. He didn't care about almost anything in there, even though every object had been carefully selected by renowned decorators. He climbed the Italian marble staircase toward his bedroom on the 2nd floor, but exhaustion and the 2 glasses of whiskey he'd had before leaving the office blurred his perception. In the wide, dimly lit hallway, Robert mixed up the doors. The staff wing was on the opposite side of the house in a section he rarely visited, but that night, tired and distracted, he turned the wrong doorknob. What he saw paralyzed him completely. In the small room, no more than 150 square feet, under the dim light of an old lamp, stood his housekeeper. She was wearing one of his old shirts, the kind he had sent to be discarded, but which somehow ended up redistributed throughout the house. Her back was to the door, and she was holding a photograph with both hands, her shoulders, trembling with a silent cry that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Beside her, on the narrow bed, was an open letter. Even from a distance, Robert could read the red stamp at the top of the paper, eviction. She hadn't noticed his presence yet. Robert knew he should leave, close the door silently and pretend this had never happened. It was what any sensible employer would do. But something kept him there, frozen, watching. Perhaps it was the raw vulnerability of the scene. Perhaps it was the shock of realizing that, for all these months, a real person had lived under his roof and he had never truly seen her. He didn't even know her full name. He only knew that she cleaned his house, prepared his meals when the cook was off, and disappeared silently as soon as he arrived, like a ghost in service of another ghost. It was then that his eyes scanned the small room and found something completely unexpected. On the opposite wall, held up with tape, was a series of architectural drawings. They weren't amateur scribbles. They were sophisticated, detailed projects with professional shading and precise technical notes. A residential building with an innovative design that integrated green spaces on every floor. A public square with complex geometry that created social zones without losing the fluidity of the space. A community center with an undulating roof that seemed almost alive. Robert had invested in enough real estate projects to recognize talent when he saw it, and this was more than talent. It was genius. He must have made some noise because she turned around abruptly. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face stained with tears. For a moment they both stood in absolute silence, like two strangers trapped in a photograph. She was 28, he realized in that moment. Delicate features, dark hair tied in a loose bun, and an expression of pure panic upon realizing her billionaire employer was standing in her doorway, seeing her in this state of total despair. "Mr. Ashford," she managed to say, her voice trembling. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to." She was trying to hide the letter, wipe her tears, compose herself all at once. Robert raised a hand, in a gesture that was meant to be reassuring, but came out too stiff, too formal. "No," he said, his own voice, sounding strange to him. "I'm the one who should apologize. I came into the wrong room. I didn't mean to invade your privacy." But he didn't leave. He stood there, looking at her, really looking, perhaps for the first time. And what he saw was someone his own age, someone who should have been in the prime of her life, but who carried a weight on her shoulders that he recognized. It was different from his weight, made of financial responsibilities and corporate decisions. Her weight was more visceral, more human. It was the weight of someone who supports real people, who makes decisions between eating and paying bills, who cries alone in a tiny room because there is no one to witness her pain. "Why are you crying?" he asked, and the question came out softer than he intended. "Has something happened?" She looked at him with a mixture of surprise and suspicion, as if she couldn't believe he was actually asking. "It's nothing, sir. Just personal things. I'll handle it." Robert could have accepted the answer. He should have. But his eyes went back to the drawings on the wall and then to the eviction notice she was trying to hide under her pillow. "You're an architect," he said, and it wasn't a question. Her face closed off even more. "I was. I'm not anymore." "Why?" The question escaped before he could think better of it. "Why aren't you practicing your profession? These drawings, they're—" He searched for the right word. "Extraordinary. Any prestigious architecture firm would hire you in a heartbeat." She let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "Do you really think it's that simple, sir? Do you think the world runs on talent alone?" Robert felt the blow, though it wasn't aimed specifically at him. Something, in the way she said "sir," carried decades of accumulated frustration. "Then explain it to me," he requested, stepping fully into the room now, forgetting all the rules of decorum between employer and employee. "Explain to me why a talented architect is cleaning my house." She stared at him for a long moment, gauging whether he was sincere or if this was just another cruelty disguised as interest. Finally, as if a dam had broken, she began to speak. "My name is Elena Sanchez. I graduated from CCNY 4 years ago. I was top of my class, my thesis project, won the National Award for Sustainable Architecture. I had offers from 3 firms in Manhattan. I was about to start at one of the biggest, with a decent salary and a chance to grow. And then my father had a stroke." Robert remained silent, but something inside him began to stir, as if a rusted mechanism was finally starting to work again after years of being still. "My father is a construction worker," Elena continued, the words coming faster now, as if she needed to expel them before losing her courage. "He worked his whole life carrying heavy loads, climbing scaffolding, building skyscrapers he could never live in. He's 56 with the body of an 80-year-old. The stroke left him with no movement on his right side. He needed intensive physical therapy, expensive medicine, constant care. My mother works as a cleaner, but her salary barely covers the rent. I have 2 younger siblings still in school, so I had to choose." "Choose between what?" Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. "Between my career and my family, between my dreams and their survival." Elena looked directly at him, and there was so much pain in her gaze that Robert felt it like a punch to the gut. "Do you know what it's like to have to make a choice like that, sir? To have to call prestigious architecture firms and tell them you can't accept the position because you need a job that pays weekly in cash so you can buy medicine for your father the next day? Do you know what it's like to see 4 years of a public university education, of sleepless nights studying, of award-winning projects, all turn to dust because you were born poor? No, Robert admitted quietly. I don't. Exactly. Eleanor turned, back to the wall to her drawings. So I took this job. You pay well, you pay on time, and you provide housing. I send almost my entire salary home. I live in this room, wear clothes you were going to throw away, and I draw at night so I don't forget who I was, or who I could have been. Robert felt a shame so deep it almost made him step back. Shame for never having asked. Shame for having a mansion with 20 empty rooms while this brilliant woman lived in a cubicle. Shame for how much money he wasted on things that meant nothing while she sent every penny to save her family. And the eviction notice, he asked, pointing to the paper she was hiding. Elena hesitated, then took the letter and handed it to him with a gesture of defeat. My parents received it today. $3,000 in back rent. The landlord gave them 15 days or they'll be evicted. My mother called me crying. She didn't want to tell me, but my younger brother told me everything. I don't have that money, not even close. Robert looked at the number on the letter. $3,000. It was less than what he spent on a business dinner. It was a ridiculous fraction of what he paid monthly just for the upkeep of this mansion he barely used. It was nothing, absolutely nothing to him, and it was everything to her. The difference between having a roof over their heads and sleeping on the street, between dignity and despair. I'll pay for it, he said. Eleanor looked at Robert as if he had spoken in another language. What? I'll pay your parents' debt, Robert repeated more firmly. $3,000. I'll transfer it tomorrow. Morning? No, Elena said immediately, recoiling as if the offer were a physical affront. Absolutely not. I don't accept charity. It's not charity, Robert insisted, feeling a strange urgency to make her understand. He searched for the words. It's justice. How long have you been working for me? 8 months. 8 months cleaning my house, preparing my meals, taking care of everything while I barely noticed your existence. 8 months earning a decent salary, but not what you deserve for your real talent. $3,000 is, he paused, it's less than I should be paying for having an award-winning architect under my roof. I'm not your architect, Elena retorted, her voice tense. I'm your housekeeper, and I don't want your pity. Robert felt the word pity like a slap, and deservedly so. He was doing this all wrong, he realized. He was trying to solve the problem as he would a financial transaction, when this was clearly much more complex and delicate. I'm sorry, he said, taking a step back. You're right. I have no right to just throw money at the problem as if that solves everything. But Elena, he used her name for the first time, and noticed she flinched slightly upon hearing it. Look at me. She raised her eyes, still defensive. I live in a 20,000-square-foot mansion, completely alone, Robert continued, and for the first time in years, there was something close to genuine emotion in his voice. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I buy things I don't need, maintain properties I don't visit, pay for services I barely use. And at the same time, you, a brilliant person, are stuck here cleaning my floors because you were born on the wrong side of the inequality line. If that isn't an obscene injustice, I don't know what is. So let me pay this debt, not as charity, as a first step toward fixing how broken this system is. Elena crossed her arms, still resistant but clearly shaken. And then what? You pay today, and tomorrow my parents will have another emergency, another impossible bill, another crisis. And what do? Come cry in my room again, hoping you'll open the wrong door? No, Robert said slowly. Tomorrow, you go back to being an architect. Elena let out a humorless laugh. Oh, it's that easy? I just decide to go back to being an architect and poof, 4 years of a lost career magically recover? Not magically, Robert conceded, but possibly. I can help. I know people, firms, I have contacts. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Elena interrupted, her frustration now evident. You think you're going to get me a job at a firm because you know me. That's not merit, it's a favor. It's privilege. It's exactly the kind of thing that separates people like you from people like me. I don't want to come in through the back door. I want to be hired because I'm good, not because I'm a billionaire's pet project. Robert fell silent, processing her words. She was right, of course, and the fact that he hadn't even considered that before showed just how disconnected he was from the reality of most people. Then, he said finally, what if we do it differently? How? I show your portfolio to an architect I know, Robert proposed, without mentioning it's you. He evaluates the work professionally without knowing who did it. If he likes it and offers a position, then I'll reveal it's you. But you only accept if you go through a normal hiring process with no special treatment. If you get the job, it will be because you deserve it. I'm just opening the door. You're the one who has to walk through it. Elena looked at him with an expression Robert couldn't decipher. It was a mixture of hope, fear, suspicion, and something deeper. And if I don't pass, then you don't pass, Robert said with brutal honesty. But at least you had a chance. Something many people with your talent never get simply because they don't know the right people. Elena, I can't change the whole system, but can try to balance the scales, even if it's just a little. Elena walked to the small window of her room, which overlooked the dark gardens outside. She stood there for a long moment, and Robert respected her silence. Finally, she turned. All right, she said softly. I accept, but with conditions. Name them. First, I pay back the $3,000, Elena established. Little by little, deducted from my salary, no matter how long it takes. Second, if I get the job at the architecture firm, I leave here. I can't be your housekeeper and an architect at the same time. And third, she looked him straight in the eye, after I leave here, we don't see each other again. No dinners, no friendship, no contact. A clean break. I can't owe anyone anything, not even gratitude. Robert felt a strange pang in his chest at the third condition, but he nodded. Agreed. He extended his hand, formal and businesslike. We have a deal. Eleanor looked at his outstretched hand, then shook it. Her palm was calloused from domestic work, but her grip was firm. We do. Robert left her room at 2 a.m. but couldn't sleep. He stayed in the mansion's library, surrounded by expensive books he'd never read, thinking about the conversation he'd just had. For the first time in years, something inside him seemed to have woken up. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't satisfaction, but it was something. It was a sense of purpose, however small. The next day, Saturday, Robert made the transfer to Elena's family before he even had his coffee. Then he called Charles Davenport, one of the most renowned architects in the country, with whom he'd done business in the past. Charles, I need you to evaluate a portfolio for me, Robert said without preamble. I'm thinking of investing in a young talent and I want your professional opinion. Charles agreed, always interested when Robert mentioned investments. Robert asked Elena for her digital portfolio that afternoon, and she handed it over with trembling hands and hopeful eyes she tried to hide. Don't disappoint me, she whispered, and Robert wasn't sure if she was talking to him or to fate. 2 days later, Charles called. Robert, where did you get this portfolio? His voice was animated, almost excited. These projects are extraordinary. The use of space, the sustainable integration, the social sensitivity. It's exactly the kind of thing we're looking for at the firm. Who is this architect? She's an architect, Robert corrected, and she's available. Send her to the office tomorrow, Charles requested. I want to meet her in person. Robert relayed the news to Elena that evening. She was in the kitchen preparing his dinner, and when she heard the words, she almost dropped the pan she was holding. He wants to meet me tomorrow? Tomorrow at 10 a.m, Robert confirmed. Address on Park Avenue. Bring your full portfolio and be prepared to present your projects. Eleanor E. looked at him, and for the first time since they had met, she smiled. It wasn't a huge or effusive smile, but it was genuine. Thank you, she said simply. Robert nodded as if it were nothing, but something inside him responded to that smile in a way he hadn't expected. You're welcome. Now go get ready. Tomorrow is an important day. Eleanor ran to her room and Robert was left alone in the enormous kitchen. He noticed that she had started making a paella, a complex Spanish dish he had casually mentioned weeks ago as something he liked. She remembered This woman he had treated as invisible for 8 months paid attention to details about him that even he himself didn't notice. That night, Robert made an impulsive decision. He decided to make dinner himself to celebrate Elena's achievement. He decided to make paella since she had started it. How hard could it be? He had seen chefs do it on television countless times. He had all the ingredients. He had pans worth tens of thousands of dollars. He had the confidence of someone who had never failed at anything he truly attempted. An hour later, the kitchen looked like a war zone. There was rice everywhere. The seafood was rubbery. The saffron had stained the marble countertop. The smoke from the burnt rice activated the fire alarm, sending sirens blaring through the mansion. Robert was in the middle of the chaos, holding a wooden spoon like a useless weapon when Eleanor came running in. She stopped at the kitchen door, looked at the scene of destruction, looked at Robert with his dress shirt stained with tomato sauce and an expression of utter despair, and did something he had never heard her do. She laughed. It wasn't a polite giggle. It was a loud, genuine belly laugh, the kind of laugh that frees something that has been trapped for a long time. "Mr. Ashford," she managed to say between laughs, "what are you trying to do?" "Paella," Robert admitted miserably. "I was trying to make paella." Elena looked at the ruined pan and laughed even harder. Then, wiping away tears of laughter, she walked over to him. "Move aside," she ordered, still smiling. "Let a professional handle this." "You don't have to," Robert began, but she gently pushed him aside. "I know I don't have to, but I want to. Now sit there," she pointed to a stool, "and watch how a real paella is made." Robert sat and watched as Elena took control of the kitchen with military efficiency. She salvaged what she could of the ingredients, discarded what was lost, and started everything over from scratch. And as she cooked, she talked, explaining each step, each ingredient, each technique. Robert realized she was teaching him not just about paella, but about patience, about process, about how some things can't be bought or rushed. They need to be built with care. 40 minutes later, there was a perfect paella on the kitchen table. Eleanor served 2 plates and sat beside him, not across from him as would be appropriate between an employer and employee, but beside him as equals. They ate in silence for a few minutes, and it was the most comfortable silence Robert had experienced in years. Elena stopped eating and looked at Robert. "Can I ask you a question?" Robert noticed she had dropped the "sir," and that meant something, though he didn't know exactly what. "You can." "Why do you live like this?" Elena gestured vaguely at the mansion around them. "Alone, in this huge place. You have everything money can buy, but you seem," she hesitated, "so empty." Robert put down his fork, the question catching him off guard with its brutal honesty. "Because I don't know how to live any other way," he admitted after a long silence. "I spent so long building my empire that I forgot how to build anything else. Relationships, friendships, real connections, all of that requires time and vulnerability, and I sacrificed both at the altar of success." "Do you regret it?" "Every day," Robert said, and it was the most honest thing he had said in years. "But I don't know how to go back. How do you reconnect with the world when you've spent decades isolating yourself from it?" Eleanor grew thoughtful, stirring the food with her fork. "You know what's funny? My parents are poor. They live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood in Queens. My father spends all day watching television because he can't work anymore. My mother comes home with her back aching from scrubbing floors. And yet, every Sunday when I was able to visit before coming to work here, the house was full of life. Neighbors dropping in, without knocking for coffee. My brother playing guitar in the living room. My mother singing while she cooked. They had nothing, but they had everything. Connection, community, love. Things you can't buy." "And now?" Robert asked softly. "Now I send money, and they pretend everything is fine, so I don't worry. I call on Sundays and hear my mother lie, saying my father is getting better when I know he isn't. I lost architecture, and I lost them too in a way. I'm stuck between 2 worlds, belonging to neither." Elena looked at him. "I think I understand your loneliness. Better than you imagine." Robert felt a connection so strong in that moment it almost scared him. Here were two strangers, separated by billions of dollars and worlds of experience, yet united by the same fundamental loneliness. "Thank you," he said, "for your honesty." "Thank you for the opportunity," Elena replied. "Tomorrow could change everything for me." And it did. Elena arrived at Charles Davenport's office at 10 in the morning, sharp, wearing the only suit she owned, bought at a thrift store but impeccably pressed. Charles greeted her personally, intrigued to meet the mind behind those extraordinary projects. The meeting that was supposed to last 30 minutes stretched into 3 hours. Elena presented not only her academic portfolio, but new ideas she had developed during her months of frustration, concepts of social architecture that integrated low-income communities with sustainable and accessible design. Charles was impressed not only by her technical talent, but by Elena's evident passion. She didn't see architecture as merely constructing buildings, but as a tool for social justice, a way to return dignity to people through the spaces they inhabited. It was exactly the vision his firm, which specialized in social impact projects, was looking for. At the end of the meeting, Charles made an offer: a 6-month paid internship, working directly with the team on community projects. The salary was 3 times what she earned as a housekeeper. If she excelled, a permanent position would be waiting. It was everything Elena had dreamed of and more. She left the office in a state of shock, her legs weak, her heart racing. She needed to tell someone, to share this explosive joy that threatened to make her scream in the middle of Park Avenue. She took out her phone and, without thinking, called Robert. "I got it," she said as soon as he answered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Robert, I got it. He offered me an internship. 6 months, decent salary, possibility of a permanent position. I'm going to be an architect again." Robert was in a meeting with Japanese investors when the phone rang. Normally he would never answer, but he saw her name on the screen and simply stood up, excused himself, and left the conference room, leaving 6 men in suits perplexed. "Elena," he said, and there was something in his voice he didn't recognize himself. It was joy, genuine, pure, without calculation or ulterior motive. "That's incredible. I'm so happy for you." They talked for 15 minutes, she recounting every detail of the meeting, he listening with total attention, asking questions, laughing with her, genuinely celebrating her success. When he hung up, Robert realized he was smiling, a real smile that used facial muscles long forgotten. He returned to the conference room, and the Japanese investors, known for their rigid formality, looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. The Robert Ashford who had left 5 minutes ago had returned completely transformed. Elena started the internship the following Monday. As agreed, she left the mansion in the Hamptons and rented a small room in a boarding house in the city, closer to the office. Robert helped her with the move, insisting on paying the first month's rent as a severance bonus. Elena accepted because she had to, but made it clear that this would be the last financial help she would accept from him. When she left with her few bags, Robert was alone in the mansion again. But this time, the loneliness was different. Before, it was just empty. Now it ached. He walked through the hallways and saw the places where she used to be. The kitchen where she had prepared that perfect paella, the garden where he had sometimes seen her watering flowers he didn't even know existed, and the small room where it all began, now empty except for the drawings still taped to the wall, which he had left behind. Robert found himself thinking about her constantly, how her internship was going, if she was adjusting well, if she was happy. He resisted the urge to call, remembering the 3rd condition she had set: a clean break, no contact. But 3 weeks later, when he returned to Manhattan for a business meeting, Robert did something completely out of character. He drove past the building where Charles's office was located, hoping to maybe catch a glimpse of her. He didn't see Eleanor, but he saw something that made him stop the car. In the office window was a displayed project, an architectural model of a playground in the Bronx, in a low-income housing area. The design was clearly hers. It had her signature on every detail, the way it integrated nature and functionality. How it created spaces that respected and celebrated the community, instead of trying to change it. Below the model, a plaque read, "Pilot Project by Architect Elena Sanchez." Robert felt a pride so intense it nearly knocked him over. She was doing it, really doing it, and he had helped, however minimally, to make it possible. For the first time in his life, his money and privilege had served a purpose beyond accumulating more money and privilege. At the office, Elena was having the most challenging and rewarding month of her life. Charles had thrown her in at the deep end right away, giving her the playground project with a ridiculously low budget and a tight deadline. It was a test she knew, a trial by fire to see if she really had what it took. Eleanor threw herself into it, body and soul. She visited the Bronx personally, spoke with residents, with the mothers who took their children to play in the streets because there was no safe space. She involved the community in the design process, asking for the children's opinions on what they wanted, the parents on what they needed. She used recycled materials where possible, negotiated with suppliers, worked with local volunteers. She turned limitations into creative opportunities. The result was a park that didn't feel designed for the community, but by the community. It had vibrant colors chosen by the children, shaded areas requested by the grandparents who cared for their grandchildren, a small amphitheater the community could use for events. It was functional, beautiful, and deeply respectful of the local identity. When Charles saw the finished project, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said only, "You're not just a talented architect, Elena. You're exactly the kind of professional this country needs." The project was approved immediately, and Elena was assigned as the lead architect for its execution. 4 months later, the park was ready for its inauguration. It was a sunny Saturday in August, and the entire community gathered for the celebration. There was music, food, children running excitedly to explore every corner of the new space. Elena was at the center of it all, surrounded by residents who hugged her, thanked her, cried with joy. She wore a simple yellow dress, and her face was lit by a smile so radiant it seemed to glow. Robert was there. He had cancelled 3 important meetings in New York to be present, though he hadn't told Elena that. He stood at the back of the crowd, just watching her interact with the children, crouching down to be at their level, listening intently to their opinions about the park, watching her hug an elderly woman who was crying with gratitude, watching her laugh as a group of boys pulled her into a soccer game on the small court she had designed. And it was in that moment, seeing Eleanor absolutely alive, doing exactly what she was born to do, that Robert understood something fundamental. He was completely, irrevocably in love with her. The revelation hit him with the force of a lightning bolt. It wasn't just admiration for her talent or respect for her character. It was love, the deep, terrifying kind that changes a person completely. Robert stood there, in the middle of the celebration, his heart pounding, and the absolute certainty that his life would never be the same. Elena saw him. Their eyes met across the crowd, and she seemed genuinely surprised but happy. She walked toward him, her yellow dress swaying, her face still radiant. "You came," she said, and there was something vulnerable in the way she spoke, as if she hadn't been sure he would. "Of course I came," Robert replied, struggling to keep his voice normal despite the turmoil of emotions. "I wouldn't miss this for the world. The park is incredible, Elena. You're incredible." She blushed slightly, looking away. "It was a team effort. The community did most of it." "Don't be modest," Robert insisted. "This is you, your vision, your passion, your ability to truly see people and create something that respects who they are. It's exactly what you said that night, remember? Architecture as a way to restore dignity. You're doing it." Elena looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was gratitude there, but also something deeper. "You know none of this would have happened without you, right? I'd still be cleaning floors if you hadn't opened that wrong door." "I opened the door," Robert said softly. "But you were the one who walked through it. No one can do that for you. The talent is yours. The achievement is yours. He searched for the words. "I was just lucky enough to witness it." Before Elena could reply, a group of children pulled her back into the celebration. She gave Robert an apologetic smile, and he waved for her to go. He stayed for another hour, just watching, until he finally forced himself to leave, before he did something stupid like confess his feelings in the middle of a park inauguration. That night, Robert was in a small anonymous restaurant in the city, the kind of place he would never normally frequent. He had come because he needed to think, and he thought better when surrounded by real people living real lives instead of isolated in his empty mansion. He was listlessly stirring a plate of food when Eleanor walked in. She didn't see him at first. She was with two friends, colleagues from the architecture firm, laughing at something one of them had said. She was wearing jeans and a simple blouse, her hair down, completely different from the shy housekeeper he had met months ago. She was, Robert realized with a pang in his chest, absolutely beautiful. Not in a conventional or ostentatious way, but in an authentic way that made everyone else in the restaurant seem like blurred shadows. When she finally saw him, Eleanor seemed genuinely delighted. She excused herself from her friends and walked to his table. "This is the second time today we've run into each other by chance," she said with a smile. "Is the universe trying to tell us something?" Robert's heart skipped a beat. "Maybe it is. Want to join me?" Eleanor hesitated for only a second before accepting. She explained to her friends that she'd run into an acquaintance and would join them later. She sat across from Robert, and for a moment they just looked at each other, a comfortable but charged silence between them. "How are you?" Robert finally asked. "I mean, really, not the polite version you give everyone." Eleanor picked up a napkin and began to fold it distractedly. "I'm exhausted," she admitted. "Happy, but exhausted. The park project was intense. Now Charles has already put me on another one, a community school in another borough. Bigger budget, more responsibility, more pressure. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to collapse." "But you won't," Robert said with conviction, "because you're stronger than you think." "Or more stubborn," Eleanor laughed. "My mum always says I inherited my dad's stubbornness. When I decide to do something, I see it through to the end, even if it kills me." "How is your father?" Robert asked, genuinely curious. Elena's face fell slightly. "Stable. Not much better, but not worse. The physical therapy helps. He can move a little better now. He's not back to work, obviously, but at least he's not completely dependent." Elena paused. "Thank you for paying that debt, by the way. My parents weren't evicted. My mother lit a candle for you at church." Robert felt an unexpected wave of emotion. "You don't have to thank me. I told you it wasn't charity." "I know, but still." Eleanor looked at him with something that could have been tenderness. "You changed my life, Robert, in a way I'll never be able to fully repay." "You already have," Robert said before he could stop himself. "You taught me how to see people again, to care about something beyond financial reports and corporate acquisitions. You reminded me that there's a real world out there, full of real people with real problems and dreams. I was dead inside, Elena. And you," he stopped, realizing he was saying too much but unable to stop. "You brought me back to life." Elena grew very still, her eyes fixed on him. "Robert," she began, her voice hesitant. "Don't say that, please." "Why?" "Because it makes everything confusing." Eleanor looked away. "When I was your housekeeper, everything was simple. There was a clear line between us. Now you're here, saying these things, and I don't know what to do with it." "What do you want to do?" Robert asked softly. Eleanor was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally she said, "I want us to be friends. Real friends. No complications, no this." She gestured vaguely between them. "You're too important to me to risk messing everything up." Robert's heart sank, but he forced a smile. "Friends, then, if that's what you want." "It's what it needs to be," Elena corrected gently. She stood up. "I should get back to my friends. They must be wondering what's going on." "Of course," Robert said, also standing. "It was good to see you, Elena." "It was good to see you, too." Elena hesitated, then impulsively leaned in and kissed his cheek. "Take care, Robert, and thank you for everything." She left, leaving a trail of inexpensive floral perfume and the phantom warmth of her lips on his skin. Robert sat back down, looking at the food that had grown cold on his plate, and realized he had made a mistake. He had shown his feelings too soon, scared her off. Now he would have to pull back, give her space, be just the friend she needed him to be, even if it killed him inside. The following months were a delicious torture. Robert and Elena established a careful, delicate friendship. They had dinner together occasionally, always in public places. They exchanged texts about trivial things. He would ask about her projects, she would ask about his business. They kept everything light, superficial, safe, but there was always a tension present, an electric current that passed between them every time their eyes met, every time their fingers accidentally touched when passing the salt. Elena was thriving professionally. The community school project was an even bigger success than the park. Her reputation was growing in the social architecture circle. She started getting invited to give lectures, for consultations, for collaborations. At 29, she was finally living the life she had always dreamed of. Robert changed too. He started getting involved in real philanthropy, not just writing checks to charities, but actually participating. He visited projects, met beneficiaries, understood where the money was going. He reduced his workload, delegated more responsibilities, stopped working 7 days a week. He started to live, for the first time in decades. But there was always Eleanor. At the back of every decision, every change was her. The desire to be worthy of her, to be the kind of man a woman like her could love without reservation. He knew he was pathetic, a 42-year-old in love like a teenager, but he couldn't help it. And he suspected, from small signs he tried not to overinterpret, that she might feel something too, but was fighting her own feelings. 6 months after the park's inauguration, Eleanor called Robert on a Tuesday night. He answered on the first ring, as he always did when he saw her name. "Hi," she said, and there was something different in her voice. "Are you free right now? I need to talk to you." "Of course," Robert said immediately, his heart speeding up with worry. "Is everything okay?" "I'm at the coffee shop near your office, the one you like. Can you come?" "I'm on my way." Robert arrived 15 minutes later, having practically run from the apartment in Brooklyn Heights where he now lived, having sold the mansion in the Hamptons because he could no longer stand the loneliness there. He found Elena sitting in a corner, 2 cups of coffee already on the table, her face pale and her eyes red as if she had been crying recently. What happened? Robert sat beside her, resisting the urge to take her in his arms. "My father," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "He had another stroke this morning, stronger than the first one. He's in the hospital now in the ICU. Robert felt the world stop. "I'm so sorry, Elena. So deeply sorry. How is he? What did the doctors say?" Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. "He's going to survive, but—" She took a deep, shaky breath. "His left side is completely paralyzed now. He's going to need intensive care, daily physical therapy, neurological follow-ups, expensive medication. The doctors mentioned experimental treatments that could help, but insurance doesn't cover them. It's all out of pocket. We're talking $20,000–$30,000 a month. My mother is desperate." "And you?" Robert asked softly. "I'm—" Elena paused, her eyes filling with tears again. "I'm scared, Robert. Scared of losing him, scared I won't be able to help. My salary is good now, but it's not enough for this. I thought about getting a loan, but the interest rates are abusive. I thought about selling the car I just bought, but even that wouldn't be enough, and the worst part is—" She let out a sob. "The worst part is I was finally making it. I was finally building my career, and now I'm going to have to choose again." "Choose?" "Between my father and my future," Elena explained, her voice thick with anguish. "Charles offered me a permanent position at the firm. Great salary, benefits, a career path. But it's full-time, sometimes more. I won't be able to take care of my father and keep the job. I'll have to turn down the offer. Look for something that gives me more flexibility, even if it pays less. It's going to be college all over again, sacrificing my dreams because I have no choice." Robert felt a fury rising inside him. Not fury at Elena or her family, but at a system so cruelly unequal that it forced brilliant people to choose between love and ambition, between caring for their loved ones and building the future they deserved. While he had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, people like Elena had to make impossible choices. "No," he said firmly. "You are not giving up your career. Not again." "Robert, don't start," Elena warned. "I've already accepted too much help from you. I can't keep depending on your generosity." "It's not generosity," Robert interrupted. He stopped, realizing that what he was about to say would change everything between them, but unable to hold back because seeing her suffer like this was unbearable. "Marry me, Elena." She stared at him as if he had spoken in Mandarin. "What?" "Marry me," Robert repeated, now committed to the idea. "Look, I know it sounds crazy. I know it's sudden, but think about it. If we get married legally, I can cover all of your father's medical expenses. I can hire the best specialists, pay for the experimental treatments, ensure he has the care he needs for as long as he needs it. I can hire full-time nurses to be with him, so your mother doesn't have to carry it, all alone. You won't have to choose between your career and your family because I'll take care of your family too." Eleanor shook her head, pulling back. "No. No. Robert, you can't just propose marriage as if it's a business transaction." "It's not a transaction," Robert insisted, taking her hands in his. "Elena, listen to me. I love you. I've been in love with you for months. I've tried to hide it, tried to respect your boundaries, but it's the truth. I love you. I wanted to ask you to marry me anyway. I was just waiting for the right moment. Your father's situation isn't creating my feelings. It's just accelerating what was already inevitable." "You can't love me," Eleanor protested, but her voice was weak, uncertain. "You barely know the real me. We were employer and employee, then distant friends. That's not enough to get married." "I know you better than I've known anyone else in my life," Robert said intensely. "I know your passion for architecture, your loyalty to your family, your incredible strength in the face of obstacles that would break anyone else. I know how you care about people, how you put others before yourself, how you turn everything you touch into something more beautiful. I know the sound of your laugh when you find something genuinely funny. I know how you wrinkle your nose when you're concentrating. I know you take your coffee with 2 spoons of sugar, but pretend to drink it black when you're with people you want to impress. Elena," he squeezed her hands, "I know you." Elena was crying now, tears streaming freely down her face. "This is insane," she whispered. "We can't get married just because my father is sick." "We're not getting married just because your father is sick," Robert corrected. "We're getting married because I love you and because if I have these resources, this obscene privilege, the least I can do is use them to help the person who matters most to me. Your family will be my family, Elena. Your problems will be my problems. Not because I pity you, but because I choose you. I choose you every day. I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you." "What if you change your mind?" Elena asked, vulnerable. "What if you wake up in 6 months and realize you made a mistake, that I'm not good enough for your world?" "Elena, you are too good for my world," Robert said with absolute conviction. "You have more integrity, more real worth than the entire social elite I know combined. They'll judge you because you come from a different world, but who cares? I don't care about their opinions, I only care about yours." Eleanor was silent for a long moment, processing everything. Finally, she said, "There are conditions. If we do this, there have to be conditions. Anything. First, this isn't a marriage of convenience," Elena established. "If we get married, it's for real. A real commitment, not an arrangement on paper. Second, I maintain my financial independence. My salary is my own. I don't want to become dependent on you. Third, if it doesn't work out, if we realize we made a mistake, we promise to be honest with each other. No staying together out of obligation. And fourth," she looked him in the eye, "you have to promise me you will never use this against me. Never throw it in my face that you helped me, that you saved my family. I need to know you're doing this because you want to, not to keep me in your eternal debt." "I promise all of that," Robert said without hesitation, "and I'll add a 5th condition. You have to promise me you'll accept my help without guilt, that you'll let me take care of you the same way you take care of everyone around you, that you'll let me love you the way you deserve to be loved." Elena let out a laugh that was half a sob. You really want to do this? Marry me? A poor girl from Queens who's going to bring her entire family's baggage with her? I want to spend the rest of my life doing this, Robert confirmed, if you'll let me. Elena looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching for any sign of doubt or ulterior motives. She found none. Okay, she said finally. Let's do this. Let's get married. Robert felt a wave of joy so intense he thought he might levitate. He pulled Elena into a hug, and for the first time, she let him. They stood there, in the nearly empty coffee shop, holding each other as she cried on his shoulder, releasing months of accumulated tension. He kissed her. Hair, her eyes, her forehead, each kiss a silent promise. In the following days, Robert proved he wasn't playing games. He hired the best neurologists in the country to evaluate Elena's father. He arranged for a transfer to a top-tier private hospital. He hired a team of nurses for full-time care. He paid for the experimental treatments the doctors had mentioned, and he did it all discreetly, without fanfare, without expecting recognition. When Eleanor took him to officially meet her family, not as her boss but as her fiancé, Robert was more nervous than he had been in any billion-dollar negotiation. The home where Elena's parents lived was a small cramped apartment in Queens, in a 4-story walk-up building. It had 2 tiny bedrooms, a living room that also served as a kitchen, and windows that looked out onto another window 10 feet away. But it was impeccably clean and full of life. Photographs on the walls, plants on the fire escape, the smell of home cooking. Elena's mother, Carmen, was a small, strong woman with calloused hands and eyes that saw right through people. She looked at Robert with initial suspicion, clearly wondering what a billionaire wanted with her daughter. But when she saw how he looked at Elena, how he treated her with obvious respect and tenderness, her expression softened. "Sit here, young man," she ordered, pointing to the worn-out sofa. "I'll get coffee, and don't give me any nonsense about not drinking it. In my house, guests drink coffee." Robert obeyed, accepting the strong, sweet coffee she served in mismatched cups. Elena's father was in a hospital bed set up in the living room, still recovering. He couldn't speak clearly, but his eyes were alert. He studied Robert for a long time, then looked at Eleanor. She nodded, answering an unspoken question. Her father sighed, then extended his good hand. Robert shook it, feeling the remaining strength in that grip. Elena's siblings, Leo, 17, and Julia, 15, were less subtle. They looked at Robert with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, clearly wondering if this rich man was for real or too good to be true. It was Julia who broke the ice, asking bluntly, "Do you really love my sister, or are you just doing this out of pity?" "Julia," Elena began, scandalized, but Robert held up a hand. "No, let her ask. It's a fair question." He looked directly at the girl. "I love your sister more than I thought it was possible to love someone, and yes, I want to help your family, but not out of pity. I'm doing it because when you truly love someone, their family becomes your family. Their problems become your problems. And because I have resources that can help, it would be wrong not to use them. But mostly, I'm doing it because Elena deserves to have someone on her side after spending so much time taking care of everyone else alone." Julia studied him for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. "Okay then, but if you hurt her, I'll kill you. I'm 15 and I have nothing to lose." "Julia!" Carmen exclaimed, but Robert laughed, a genuine laugh. "I believe you, and I promise I won't hurt her." The lunch was simple but delicious. Rice and beans, steak with onions, and salad. Eleanor helped her mother in the kitchen, while Robert stayed in the living room with her father and siblings. Leo eventually struck up a conversation about baseball, and Robert, who had never cared much for sports, listened intently as the boy spoke passionately about the Yankees. It was strange, surreal even, to be sitting in that small room, so different from any place he frequented, but it was also the realest thing he had experienced in years. As they were leaving, Carmen pulled Robert aside. "Look here, young man," she said quietly, firmly. "I don't know much about your world of money and business, but I know about people, and I can see you really care for my daughter. I only ask one thing of you. Don't let those rich people change her. Elena is special because she never forgot where she came from, because she uses her talent to help people like us. Don't let her become one of those empty socialites we see on television." "Never," Robert promised solemnly. "I love her exactly as she is. If anything, I'm the one trying to learn to be more like her." Carmen studied him for another moment, then nodded. "Then you have my blessing. Take good care of my girl." "I will, every day of my life." Elena and Robert were married 3 months later, not in a lavish church or a 5-star hotel, but in the courtyard of the building where she grew up. It was Carmen who had insisted. This is where Elena learned to walk, learned to play, learned to dream. This is where she should get married. The courtyard was decorated simply, with flowers and string lights. There were plastic chairs borrowed from neighbors, a long table laden with food made by the entire community, and music playing from a boombox. The guests were a strange mix of two worlds. Renowned architects from Elena's firm, standing next to construction worker friends of her father, business partners of Robert sharing space with neighbors from Queens. It was chaotic and loud and absolutely perfect. Elena wore a simple white dress without any luxuries, but she was so radiant that Robert could hardly breathe when he saw her walking toward him. She cried during their vows. So did he. When the justice of the peace declared them husband and wife, the entire community erupted in cheers and shouts of joy. Children ran to hug Elena. Neighbors embraced Robert as if he were one of them. It was the happiest day either of them had ever lived. In the middle of the party, Robert asked for everyone's attention. He had an announcement to make. With Elena by his side, holding her hand, he revealed the creation of the Elena Sanchez Foundation, dedicated to supporting young talent from underserved communities. $20 million in initial funding, with a commitment to add more each year. Full scholarships, professional mentorship, connections to the job market. Everything Elena hadn't had, everything that had made her journey so much harder than it needed to be, the foundation would provide for others. Elena knew nothing about it. Robert had planned it all in secret. She looked at him with tears streaming down her face, unable to form words. The entire community fell into a shocked silence, then exploded in celebration again. Carmen cried on her husband's shoulder. Leo and Julia hugged their sister. It was more than a wedding. It was the union of two worlds that should never have met, but which somehow fit together perfectly. The following years were the happiest of both their lives. They moved to a smaller, cozier house in the Park Slope neighborhood of Brooklyn. It wasn't a mansion, but it had enough space and was filled with life. Robert drastically reduced his workload, delegating most of the day-to-day operations of his company to trusted executives. He started working only 4 days a week, dedicating the rest of his time to the foundation and to being present in real life. Elena continued to thrive as an architect. She became one of the most respected professionals in social architecture in the country. Her projects won international awards. She gave lectures at universities, inspiring young architects to use their skills to make a social impact. And best of all, she was able to do it all without sacrificing her family this time. Elena's father improved significantly with the treatments. He never fully recovered movement on his left side, but he could walk with the help of a cane, speak clearly, and even started doing small consulting jobs for construction companies. Carmen was finally able to reduce her work hours, spending more time with her children. Leo got into engineering school with a full scholarship from the foundation. Julia discovered a talent for design and was also being supported, but not everything was easy. Robert's social world, as Elena had predicted, did not accept her easily. There were dinners where other women looked at her with thinly veiled disdain, charity events where she was treated like an intruder. Vicious comments about her being a gold digger circulated through the elite circles. Elena tried not to let it bother her, but Robert saw how it hurt her. At one particularly awful gala, where 3 women made cruel comments about Elena's origins loud enough for her to hear, Robert made a decision. In the middle of the event, he took the microphone and gave an impromptu speech. He spoke about privilege and merit, about how the elite congratulated themselves for achievements that were merely consequences of being born into the right family, while people like Elena achieved the extraordinary despite every obstacle society placed in their path. He spoke about real values versus superficial ones, and he concluded by saying that if anyone there had a problem with his wife, they would have to deal with him directly, because she had more class and character than the entire room combined. The silence was deafening. Then, surprisingly, one of the most influential women in New York society began to applaud. Others joined in. Not everyone. Some left in a huff, but enough to make a difference. Elena looked at Robert with a mixture of mortification and profound love. Then she whispered in his ear, "You are completely insane. I love you so much." The foundation grew beyond their wildest expectations. In its first year, it supported 50 young people from underserved communities. In the second, 200. By the third, it began expanding to other cities. Elena was deeply involved, not just lending her name, but actively working with the recipients, mentoring, advising, connecting. Seeing young talents get opportunities she had almost lost was the most rewarding thing she had ever done. Robert had changed completely. The emotionally empty man who had lived alone in a cavernous mansion was unrecognizable. He laughed now. Truly laughed. He had real friends, not just business contacts. He visited Elena's family every Sunday, played dominoes with the neighbors, helped Leo with his math homework. He discovered he was good with children and started casually mentioning the idea of maybe having their own someday. One evening, 5 years after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch of their house, watching the sunset over the city. Elena was leaning against him, her head on his shoulder, their fingers intertwined. "You know you saved me, right?" Robert said suddenly. Elena lifted her head to look at him. "Me? You saved me? You gave me my career back, took care of my family, changed my entire life." "No, Elena," Robert insisted. "You saved me from an empty life, from that man I was becoming, rich but dead inside. That night when I walked into your room by mistake, you reminded me that there are things more important than money and power. You taught me how to truly see people, to care, to live. I had everything and I had nothing. Now I have you. I have purpose. I have a real life. You are literally the best thing that has ever happened to me." Elena felt tears in her eyes. "Funny. I was going to say the same thing about you. Remember when you asked if I was okay? In that room, that night. It was the first time in months that someone had really seen me as a person. Not as a housekeeper, not as a poverty statistic, but as a human being. You treated me with dignity when I was at my lowest point. You gave me back my dreams when I had already given up on them. How could I not fall in love with you?" Robert pulled her into a long, deep kiss. When they parted, he said, "So I guess we saved each other." "I guess so," Eleanor agreed. "Two castaways who found each other in the middle of the ocean and built an island together." "I like that metaphor," Robert smiled. "Although technically I was the billionaire castaway with a sinking luxury yacht, and you were the architect building survival rafts out of scrapwood." Elena laughed. "You always have to turn everything into a class metaphor, don't you?" "It's part of my charm," Robert teased. "It's why you love me." "No," Eleanor said, turning serious again. "I love you because you chose to change, because when you had the chance to keep living in your bubble of privilege, you chose to step out of it, because you use your power to lift others up instead of just yourself, because you treat me as an equal, not as a charity project, and because," she touched his face gently, "you make me happy. Every day, in big ways and small, you make me happy." "That's my only mission in life now," Robert admitted, "to make you happy. And maybe in the process make this world a little less unfair." "I think we're succeeding," Elena said, looking out at the city below, where somewhere another young talent was fighting against impossible odds, just as she had. "And we're going to keep succeeding." They sat there until night fell completely. Two worlds that should never have met but had become one, proving that true love knows no class boundaries, that the recognition of human worth can happen in the most unlikely of places, and that sometimes, just sometimes, opening the wrong door can lead you exactly where you need to be. It wasn't a fairy tale about a prince saving a damsel. It was the story of two imperfect people who saved each other, building a love based on respect, justice, and a profound recognition of each other's worth, all because Robert, one rainy night, opened the wrong door and finally saw what had been invisible before him all along. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Robert and Elena has touched your hearts in the same way it touched ours while writing it. This narrative reminds us that true love is born from the recognition of human dignity, that privilege should be used to lift others, and that it's never too late to change and become a better person. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of the exclusive stories we bring you daily. Leave a like if Elena and Robert won you over, and tell us in the comments which moment touched your heart the most. Your interaction means everything to us and helps us continue creating content that truly matters. Until the next story, and remember, sometimes the best things in life happen when we open the wrong door at the right time.